there. Welcome back to part 4 of the horror show that is Diddy's Trial Week 2. So now we are getting to the point of the coveted, most wanted, anticipated testimony of maybe second to Cassie's mom, would be Kid Cudi and some of the others. But Kid Cudi was pretty much a star witness, I think, for this particular part of the sharing. And there are several other individuals that we're going to also be hearing from. We're going to also hear some testimony from a makeup artist who is going to corroborate some of the stuff that Cassie had shared, as well as we've got the Punisher making a cameo back in. We also have David James, the executive assistant, that's also got some testimony that we're going to be zoning in on for this particular part. And we also have a Kaplan, who is a new name at this point as far as the parts are concerned, and we're going to hear something from him as well. And also a doctor who was there to speak about DB and the situation surrounding that type of a phenomenon. So we've got a lot to cover. We also have a couple of other ones here as well. The FBI agent is going to talk to some things that was seen at the time, I believe, of arrest. And we also have testimony from apparently a general manager of the hotel in regards to things that were needed or provided for these freak-offs. So we've got so much to cover in this particular part here. So definitely I want you to sit back and relax. Be thinking about what you want to share in regards to the information that you're hearing about today, or in this part anyways, as far as what you're thinking about, the testimony, what's been provided. Definitely be leaving us respectfully down below. I would love to know what you're thinking in regards to the testimony and information that's been provided in regards to those said testimonies. So again, like I said, this is going to be a lot to cover in this particular video. So I'm going to go through it and let's just hit it and get on in it, right? All right. So this sharing is coming to us by way of Deadline. And it says, Kid Cudi was to testify Thursday in Sean Diddy Combs' trafficking trial about threats against him and Cassie Ventura. It's not exactly the rap battle anyone ever liked or likely envisioned, but May 22nd, we'll see Sean Diddy Combs with Kid Cudi going head to head as a Happy Gilmore 2 star gives testimony in the Bad Boy Records founder's sex trafficking trial. Now, Kid Cudi, aka Scott Cudi, will take the stand in Judge Ron Lower, Manhattan courtroom on Thursday. Prosecutors confirmed Wednesday, I believe, is when they confirmed it last Wednesday. Thursday, this past Thursday, is when the testimony took place. Now, starting off on last Wednesday's hearing of week 2, before the jury was in the room, by informing the judge and defense team that the Man on the Moon rap star would not be testifying that day. The feds had bailed at the end of the day after the jurors had exited that Kid Cudi would now be in the witness box on Thursday. According to Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey, yes, we've noted before, daughter of former FBI Director, U.S. Attorney, and TFO, James Comey, and the feds expect, that was, daughter of James Comey. And the feds expect Kid Cudi to be a brief witness, along with the Grammy winner. The prosecution intends to call a total of 5 witnesses on Thursday, all to be dealt with quite quickly, they insist. So this is the kind of the run of the mill for some of those who are probably going to just speak on a couple of points and a couple of things that have happened and then kind of quickly get them off the stage. To stand. So joining the likes of Cassie Ventura, a couple of male escorts who were paid to have filmed S with Ventura in the much discussed freak-offs, Ventura's mother and some law enforcement officials. Cudi will be the 13th witness for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York in Combs' criminal case. Likely every day of the trial, jury selection, and pretrial hearings, Combs was in court today, and he will be again Thursday. He was for the remainder of the week. Now, predicted to last at least 8 weeks, the criminal trial to the much accused Diddy follows his arrest last September on charges of racketeering, trafficking, transportation to engage in the acts that you get paid for, source of the P that you cannot do, that's of an echelon nature, and more. Now, incarcerated, of course, at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn since his arrest after a trio of failed $50 million bail attempts, Diddy has always insisted he is innocent. He has taken the same position in the dozens of civil suits of abuse and assault that have been filed in the court dockets over the past several months. Rejecting a plea deal from the government, Combs could face life behind bars if found guilty in this criminal trial. Now, from the moment Cassie Ventura filed her very quickly settled $20 million ABUSC and assault suit against ex-boyfriend Combs in late 2023, the name of Kid Cudi has been connected to the self-described toxic relationship between the Me and You singer and the All About the Vengeance Benz performer. As various filings plus testimony from Ventura and her mother have stated, the singer and Cudi had a short romantic relationship in 2012. Along with various threats against the duo, a jealous Combs promised to explode up Kid Cudi's car in his own driveway to keep him away from Ventura, as Ventura's 2023 filing bluntly said. Around that time, Kid Cudi's car did, go up in flames in his driveway. Now, at the time, reps for Kid Cudi had confirmed the car destruction from a decade before. Now, Cudi will testify right after the jury has heard more from former Diddy executive assistant George Kaplan, who's not entered into the room. And in court Wednesday, under the duress of a subpoena, like fellow Combs ex-DA, executive assistant David James, who testified earlier this week, Kaplan entered the witness box around about 11:48 a.m. Pacific time. Now, detailing his gopher duties to date to the court, Kaplan is known to have left his employment after a year, in some part due to the violence he said to have seen. Before Kaplan, this third day of second week of Combs' May 12th starting trial, heard testimony from psychologist Don Hughes and Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent Gerard Gannon. The latter was involved in the raid on Combs' Miami residence in the spring of 2024. Now, along the Combs trial, Kid Cudi will be back in Lower Manhattan next month in a completely unrelated manner. All right, so now moving on to a sharing from Business Insider. It says that says Diddy broke into his home, unwrapped his family's Christmas gifts, and shut his dog in the bathroom. Some key points to this sharing is Kid Cudi had testified in Sean Diddy Combs' trafficking trial this past Thursday, and the rapper once dated Combs' ex Cassie Ventura. Ventura previously testified that her 2012 romance with Kid Cudi made Combs irate. Now, the rapper Kid Cudi told Manhattan federal jury on Thursday that Sean Diddy Combs broke into the Los Angeles home after the hip-hop mogul found out he was dating the R&B singer Cassie Ventura. Now, Christmas gifts from Chanel that Kid Cudi had planned to give to his family were unwrapped and opened, and his dog, was shut in the bathroom during the December 2011 break-in. He testified at Combs' trafficking and racketeering trial. Now, Kid Cudi, whose given name is Scott Muscudi, was called as a government witness in the trial, which is in its second week of testimony. And Cudi said he learned of the break-in in real time the morning after spending the night with Ventura at the Sunset Marquis Hotel. He told jurors that one of Combs' trusted assistants, Capricorn Clark, called to say that she was outside of Cudi's house and that Combs was inside. Clark told him that Combs had forced her physically to drive there with him, Cudi said. MF, you in my house? Cudi recalled telling Combs over the phone as he rushed to the home in the Hollywood Hills. He said he wants to talk to me, Cudi said of Combs' response during the phone call. I said, I'm on my way over right now. And he said, I'm over here waiting for you, Cudi told the jury, adding that Combs sounded calm. Now, Cudi added, I wanted to confront him. I wanted to fight him, but he said he feared Combs might not be alone for any actual confrontation. By the time he returned, Combs was nowhere to be found, Cudi said. Some gifts that I had bought for his family, had been opened, and Cudi testified of what he found inside. And then my dog was in my bathroom. He said his dog was acting very jittery. Of course, I'm sure all these individuals coming in, allegedly. Prosecutors were barred by the judge from asking Cudi for any details about lasting changes in the dog's behavior after the break-in, including that it persisted in relieving himself on the floor, obviously out of fear, right? Anxiety and such. There are some dog lovers potentially on the jury, of course, and the defense lawyer Brian Steele complained to the judge prior to Cudi that the jurors entering the courtroom. I agree, U.S. District Judge Arun told the defense. It's a serious issue, the judge said. I'll stop at any answers that are about the long-term consequences to the dog, because that's going to be a nail in the coffin, right? With as many people who love their pets, even more so than they love people. Now, Cudi and Ventura, the prosecution's star witness in Combs' trial, briefly had dated in 2011 while Ventura was on a break from Combs. Ventura and Combs dated on and off between 2007 and 2018. Now, Cudi told jurors that Combs reached out to him a couple of times. I guess he was in the dark about things and wanted to talk, Cudi said. But Cudi said he told Combs, "You broke into my house. You messed with my dog. I don't want to talk to you." Now, during Ventura's more than 20 hours of testimony last week, she told the 8-man, 4-woman jury how her 2011 romance with Cudi enraged Combs and that he wanted to set fire to his car. Now, Cudi said his Porsche was torched while parked in his driveway. Cudi had testified on Thursday that his Porsche had indeed been firebombed weeks after the break-in while he wasn't home and it was parked in his driveway. "Looks like the top of my Porsche was cut open. That's where they inserted the Molotov cocktail," Cudi told jurors as they were shown photos of his torched convertible. A day or so after the firebombing, the rival rappers agreed to meet and settle their differences at the Soho House in West Hollywood, Cudi said. "After the fire, I was like, this is getting out of hand," he said. Cudi recalled being escorted by a Combs security guard into a conference room high above Beverly Hills. One wall was all windows, he remembered. Sean Combs was standing there staring out the window with his hands behind his back like a Marvel supervillain, Cudi said, prompting a burst of laughter in the courtroom. "Yeah, it was just me and him in the room. No security, nobody," he added. He said the two men talked about how Ventura had told each of them that their relationships were exclusive. "His whole point was, we were homies," Cudi said of Combs. "I let him know that, she told me they were broken up and I took her word for it. It was weird and off-putting that Combs was so calm," Cudi testified. "Sometime into the meeting, Ventura joined the two men in the room. I was upset to find out that she had kind of went back to him," Cudi said. He said the meeting ended with a handshake. "As I was shaking his hand, I said, 'What are we going to do about my car?'" Cudi told the jury. "I made sure to ask him right when our hands were clasped together where he couldn't run away and I could look him square in the eyes," Cudi said. "And he looked right back at me with a very cold stare and said, 'I don't know what you're talking about,'" Cudi testified. "That's your world," he recalled, asking Combs while taking his hands away. He said, "Yeah." Ventura's 2023 lawsuit against Combs, now settled, first suggested that Combs was responsible for the 2012 firebombing. Now, prosecutors have alleged that Combs previously ordered his underlings to torch the car using the Molotov cocktail. Now, Combs faces life in prison if the jury convicts him on those sex trafficking charges tied to Ventura and another woman. Now, during his testimony, Cudi told the jury that he had strong feelings for Ventura, but that they broke it off because the drama was just getting out of hand. "Kind of wanted to give her some space. The break-in and everything," Cudi testified, "just felt like things were getting out of hand for my safety, for her safety. I knew Sean Combs was violent," Cudi said. Cudi said he saw Combs a couple of years later at the Soho House and he pulled Meads aside and basically said, "Man, I just want to apologize for everything and all that BS," Cudi had said. "I found peace with it. That was the last thing I was expecting of him," said Cudi. Now, of course, the story was updated with additional details from Cudi's testimony, and it also further wants to share that if you are a survivor of SA or know anyone that it may be, you can call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 or visit its website to receive confidential support. And I will for sure make sure that information is down in the sharing in the description area below for your reference as well. Now, according to source article from ABC7.com, it shares that Sean Combs' trial updates and court is adjourned until Tuesday of Kid Cudi's testimony. So given that we are now into the Memorial Day weekend, Monday being Memorial Day, and today, of course, and the day that of this upload this video, it was shared on Thursday because Friday was no testimony as well, that they were basically soon for the holidays, and for a much needed break, I'm sure, for the juries and everybody else in there as well. They were going to commence tomorrow on the 27th for new testimony, witnesses, and all that good stuff. So the second week of testimony in the S trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs had begun on Monday. And Combs has been accused, of course, of S trafficking, which we know by force, transportation to engage in the P and racketeering conspiracy as part of a blockbuster federal indictment originally filed in September 2024, and he later faced two additional superseding indictments as well. Combs has pleaded, of course, not guilty to all of the charges. Definitely want to just put that trigger out there again. At the story may contain accounts and descriptions of actual or alleged events that some readers may find, well, disturbing. Now, Bad Rap, the case against Diddy, a new podcast for 2020, and ABC Audio traces how the whispers of ABUSC came to light and led to the downfall of Sean Diddy Combs, who was once among the most influential entertainers and entrepreneurs in hip hop. And of course, you're able to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Yes, one of the things that we have definitely been able to receive is quite a bit of documentaries, and now it appears podcasts as well, episodes in regards to this trial, which is really kind of, in my opinion, like a trial of the century type of event. Now, court again adjourned until Tuesday. A judge had said trial is right on schedule, so that's good to know. Nobody's falling behind at this point. He says testimony concluded for the week with an agent from Homeland Security Investigations who conducted the computer extractions from 3 laptops that belonged to Cassie Ventura. One of the laptops included a user profile of Frank Black, an alias used by Sean Combs. Court adjourned again until Tuesday. Do not talk to anyone about the case, Judge Aron instructed the jurors, telling them instead, watch the Knicks avenge their game 1 loss. Submarinian told the jury the trial is right on schedule. And when court resumes on Tuesday, federal prosecutors said they plan to call Combs' former assistant, Capricorn Clark, and representatives from the LAPD and LAFD. So LAPD Police Department and LAFD, which would be with the federal department or something like that, federal district or whatever. Yeah, it's the police department, federal department, I guess, like for the feds. I think we are right on time, Prosecutor Maureen Comey said, telling the jury the government's case would take about 6 weeks total. We're also hearing up to 8. It'll take as much time as it's going to take, right? Because I would think that we should be able to wrap this up before the 4th of July, which will probably be definitely music to everyone's ears, no pun intended, so that it can be done and spend time with their family. Now, the defense is asking for Combs to have additional access to video conferencing from jail, and the judge said he has had no luck with the Bureau of Prisons. Prosecutors said that they would call and ask on the judge's behalf video conferencing time. The defense sought additional phone time, saying Combs is out of minutes. Do not talk to anyone about the case, Judge Aron instructed the jurors, telling them instead watch the Knicks game again and see their avenge their loss. Let's see. What we've got here. All right, so then we also move on to some points in regards to the hotel's manager's note that Combs always spills candle wax on everything. And I mentioned about the general manager. There was some conversation testimonial provided by him. So as the manager of the Hermitage, I've never heard of it, Beverly Hills Hotel, showed the jury a reservations log with entries that indicated Sean Combs had stayed at the hotel several times. Now, the log included several of the aliases that previous witnesses have testified Combs used, including Frank Black and Frank White. He really liked Frank, and I wonder if that has any connection to the American gangster who's Frank, and I can't think of his last name at the moment. The general hotel manager, Frederick Zemore, said guest profiles include notes. Combs' guest profile note, which was shown to the jury, included the following: always spills candle wax on everything and uses excessive amounts of oil, placed room out of order upon departure for deep cleaning. Oh, disgusting is that. The note also instructed reservation takers to authorize an extra $1,000 to cover room damages when Combs stayed at the hotel. That's it? Only $1,000, huh? Housekeeping was instructed to put fruit and chocolate in Combs' room and keep the thermostat at 75 degrees, according to Zemore's testimony, and to spray air freshener outside any room in which Combs had stayed. Makeup artist testified she allegedly found Cassie Ventura with a swollen eye and busted lip. Now we're moving on to the makeup artist I mentioned and also testified. As you can see, they're kind of rapidly going through some of these witnesses on this day. Makeup artist Mila Morales testified that it was Grammy weekend 2010 when she returned to Beverly Hills Hotel after a night out with Cassie Ventura. According to her testimony, Morales fell asleep on the couch but woke up to a little bit of commotion. Morales told the court that Ventura walked in and headed into the bedroom, and Sean Combs entered a moment later. Where the F is she? Morales testified, and angry Combs had asked. Morales told the court that Combs walked into the bedroom and shut the door. Morales testified that she then heard yelling and screaming before Combs allegedly opened the bedroom door and stormed out of the suite. I was just frantic and I didn't know what to do, Morales testified. She had a swollen eye and a busted lip and knots on her head, referring to Ventura. Morales, who testified that she first met Ventura when she was 16 years old, told the court that she took Ventura to her house where she stayed a few days to recover. Oh, that is oh, 16 is when she met her. That's so sad. My friend, who was a doctor, a medical doctor, I asked him to come the next day to make sure she didn't have a concussion, Morales testified. Morales told the court that the doctor suggested Ventura be taken to the emergency room, but it was her wishes not to go to the ER. Right, because I would imagine, wouldn't that make them mandatory reporters? Now, asked why Morales did not insist that Ventura go, Morales replied, "We were very afraid." She testified they were afraid of Sean. "I fear for my life," Morales told the court. Morales and Ventura never ever again spoke about the alleged incident at the Beverly Hills Hotel, according to Morales' testimony. "I knew Sean Combs was violent," Kid Cudi concludes in his testimony. So now we're going to cross back on over to Kid Cudi's testimony. Now, on cross-examination, Scott Muscudi, or Kid Cudi, as we know him, testified that Cassie Ventura told him about alleged physical ABUSC she said she suffered at the hands of Sean Combs, but that she did not mention sexual abuse. Defense attorney Brian Steele said both Cudi and Combs were played by the same woman. Now, this is a defense attorney because, of course, they want to kind of provide that narrative of that it was something else other than what I think we all may be able to see what it was. The person who played Sean was Miss Ventura. True? Steele asked. "Well, yeah," Cudi replied. At the conclusion of cross-examination, Steele thanked Cudi, who responded, "Yeah, no problem." On redirect examination, Cudi testified that Ventura told him that Combs would hit her, sometimes kick her. So, that fast one that the defense, of course, is, paid to do, to try to get him on and off as soon as possible. So I'm glad that they did that re-examine to get the full story. Now, Cudi told the court that he and Ventura broke up because things were getting out of hand and that he felt concerned for, of course, his safety and hers. He said, "I knew Combs was violent," and it prompted an objection and a sidebar when he made that statement apparently in court. Now, during the Soho House Social Club meeting in 2012, when, according to Cudi's earlier testimony, Combs had claimed not to know that Cudi was talking about regarding the firebombing in his car, well, Cudi had told the jury that he thought Combs was lying. Of course he did. Now, Cudi's testimony has concluded, and the court was then sent to lunch at that point. Now, Kid Cudi had testified Combs looked like a Marvel supervillain in meeting after the car fire, which I mentioned, in somewhat detail earlier, but let's see if there's anything new to that. This is a couple of days after his Porsche was firebombed. Cudi, aka rapper Cudi, Scott, aka Kid Cudi, testified that he called Sean Combs. Since I reached out to him after my car had caught on fire, looks like that's pretty much the same thing that we kind of went over. And he said he had been wanting to talk to him after the fire, and this is getting out of hand. It's basically the conversation. So when the prosecutor, Emily Johnson, asked Cudi, called Combs regarding the firebombing of his car, he replied, "I knew he had something to do with it." The defense objected, and the judge instructed the jury to disregard the response. Now, Cudi testified that he and Combs arranged to meet at the Soho House Social Club in Los Angeles, where Cudi testified that he saw Sean Combs standing there staring out the window with his hands behind his back like a Marvel supervillain. The remark had earned a chuckle in the courtroom. We discussed the whole story about how me and Cassie first started to date, to what it was and how it ended. His whole point was, we were homies. She was my girl. I let him know that she told me they were broken up, Cudi had testified. Now, of course, he talked about Combs' demeanor and how he seemed pretty calm. And Diddy asked about his car. And of course, we know that Diddy had allegedly said what car. Now, Cudi had testified that he withdrew his hand, whereupon Combs had asked, "I thought we were cool. Do we have a problem?" And Cudi testified that he confirmed that Combs was given his word that he didn't burn his car. Now, Cudi told the court that a couple of years later, he had saw Combs again at the Soho House in Los Angeles, and he was with his daughter, and he pulled me to the side and basically apologized for everything. He said, of course, which we covered earlier, that he wanted to apologize, that everything was just, that BS was obviously unnecessary. He said, "After I got the apology, I found peace with it, and that was the last thing I was expecting to get from him," Cudi testified. No, obviously, Cudi then moved on with his life. Now, a former employee said he was pushed to depths he didn't know he had. Now, working for Sean Combs left quite an impression on George Kaplan, who is now 34. "He pushed me to depths I didn't know I had," Kaplan said on cross-examination. Recalling his time as Combs' personal assistant for a 15-month period between 2013 and 2015, Kaplan said, "I'm a young man. This is a God among men." Really? God among men? what do we tell people about this worshiping individuals? You never can go anywhere positive when you do that. Let's move on. Defense attorney Mark Agnew said, "You still remember Combs' birthday?" Kaplan immediately responded, "November 4th. He said it occurred to him that had he still been employed by Combs Enterprises, he would not have had to work yesterday because it was Biggie's birthday." Oh, how hooey for them. Now, at Combs Enterprises, the May 21st birthday of Biggie Smalls is a paid company holiday. Interesting. Now, when Kaplan left due to the alleged violence he kept witnessing and fixing for Combs, he had told the jury, "My friends told me this was my Harvard and I was blowing it." Asked about the incident on the plane, Kaplan said he did not recall seeing any physical injuries, but heard a glass breaking and he was holding one. Kaplan also testified on cross-examination he did not trust housekeeping staff to clean up after Combs at hotels because he feared they were looking for a payday. The defense showed a note Kaplan had sent Combs after Kim Porter's death because I was heartbroken for him. Kaplan also said he has respect for Combs, but the alleged violence he witnessed shook him tremendously. On redirect, Kaplan said, "Even though he saw no physical injuries to Cassie, in my heart of hearts, I knew what was happening and I felt an element of guilt that I didn't do anything to stop it." Kaplan's testimony is over, and then Cudi has taken the stand at this point. Now, Kaplan had testified he had witnessed 3 instances of violence while working for Combs. So let's get into that. George Kaplan had testified that he had witnessed at least 3 alleged instances of violence during the time he had served as a personal assistant to Sean Combs. Kaplan testified that in one alleged instance, he recalled glass shattering on a private plane traveling to Las Vegas and seeing Combs holding a whiskey glass over his head and Cassie Ventura on the floor of the plane, holding her hands in front of her face. In a second alleged incident, Kaplan testified that he was summoned to Combs' bedroom where he told the court he saw Ventura crying on her bed with her head in her hands. Kaplan testified that she was clearly upset and it was clear there was bruising on her face. Now, Kaplan testified Combs sent him into a pharmacy to buy lotion and witch hazel, which he told the court he understood were to be mixed to act as an anti-swelling agent. And what Kaplan testified was the last straw for him. He told the court that in the fall of 2015, he saw a very angry Combs throwing these green apples that lived in a decorative vessel in the entryway of his Miami home. The apples were allegedly aimed at another girlfriend of Combs, who Kaplan told the court was trying to shield herself with her arms. Kaplan had then testified that he never attempted to intervene in these alleged instances because it was not his place to do so. He described himself as a young kid, really trying to make it in the entertainment industry. "This was my first professional endeavor," telling the court, "I thought for a second this might be normal." The same night as the alleged apple throwing incident, Kaplan testified that Combs summoned him to bring him what Kaplan describes as Combs' medicine bag. There was definitely some tension in the room, and Kaplan testified, telling the court that the woman at whom Combs allegedly threw the apples was standing in the corner on the other side, very far away. Later, Kaplan had testified he had heard the woman's voice and a lot of commotion near the front gate involving men that he told the court he assumed to be Combs' security guards. Kaplan had testified that he had left the company in a short time later. "I was not comfortable being aligned with physical behavior I had been seeing pieces of during the course of those months." Kaplan had told the court, "Being a party to the kind of stuff." Yeah, because eventually you become a witness. Now, on cross-examination, Kaplan testified that he kept in touch with Combs after leaving his employment because he liked him. Now, former employee granted immunity before testifying. Now, during the jury's lunch break, George Kaplan, a former employee of Sean Combs, was granted immunity. Without it, Kaplan signaled his intention to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So Judge Arun granted the order. Now, Kaplan will definitely testify pursuant to a subpoena following the testimony of Don Hughes, because Don Hughes is a psychologist, right? And also, we do know that he was one of the ones, I believe, that was subpoenaed. I don't know if anyone else had to be subpoenaed at this time. I think everyone else came on their own, but he was. So let's go ahead and get into psychologists describing the coping mechanisms abuse. All right. So we had a psychologist come in and speak to DB and the type of characteristics that can come from that particular situation. So though she testified generically about an abuse victim's passive and active self-defense, psychologist Dawn Hughes described some of the coping mechanisms the jury heard Cassie Ventura employed in her 11-year relationship with Sean Combs. Passive self-defense is something the least provocative as possible, Hughes said, listing as one example curling up in a ball. Of course. Both Dawn and Carrie described seeing Ventura drop into a fetal position during beatings they said they witnessed Combs inflict on her. Now, Hughes also described a link between trauma and substance abuse. Ventura testified she turned to DRUGSs during the freak-offs to numb herself and become addicted to opiates. On a cross-examination, the defense took pains to stress how Hughes did not examine Ventura or anyone else associated with the case. You can't diagnose somebody without hearing what they have to say, correct? That Mock asked. Correct, Hughes answered. The defense also asked about the concept of malingering, which Hughes defined as fabricating psychological symptoms. People can fabricate emotional responses, correct? Mock asked. They can, Hughes responded. Now, court is taking its lunch break. Apparently, it took it at 12:45 when cross-examination of Hughes continued. Now, psychologist takes the stand to discuss abusive relationships. So now they took their break, they came back, now they have more to discuss. It is very common for victims to stay in abusive relationships, not because they are unconcerned about the ABUSC, but because they feel trapped. Expert witness testified Wednesday at the trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Combs. No victim wants to be abused, Dr. Dawn Hughes said. They stay in the relationship because it's not just about hitting. It's about a lot of abusive behaviors that make a victim feel trapped. She also testified that abuse is often not the only defining characteristic of a relationship. There's almost always love, Hughes said. It creates an intense psychological bond that creates an attachment with their abuser. Of course, because no one really, you don't see the monster at the beginning, right? Allegedly, of all things here, but you don't see that. I mean, someone's not going to just go to someone who does that off the bat. There has to be a grooming process, which that's been mentioned in previous parts for this week. So yeah, of course it starts with love, because it has to start from a place of feeling safe. It obviously is a warped way of doing that, but to get someone to feel that you're okay in a safe place for that person to be. And then the abuse then starts to unfold. Now, expert witnesses are not allowed to examine the defendant, alleged victims, or witnesses in a criminal case. You spoke generally about why victims of repeated violence and sexual assault remain in a relationship, though it cannot be lost on the jury that her testimony followed days of testimony about Combs and Cassie Ventura. It's hard for us to break up with someone under the best of circumstances, Hughes said. When you have all this violence in ABUSC, you're just trying to live day to day in this very micro way, explaining that emotional resources become devoted to avoiding getting hit instead of how to get out of an abusive relationship. Now, she said trauma victims experience a tremendous amount of shame, humiliation, and degradation. If you can't talk about what's happening in the relationship, then you can't get help. And who's going to talk about all these humiliating, degrading things that are happening to you, Hughes said. If victims are able to escape an abusive relationship, Hughes told the jury, they are often returned. As Ventura testified, she did repeatedly with Combs, hence the 11-year relationship. They return for the love. They return for the companionship. They return for the good version of their partner that they love, you said. She described the coping mechanisms of ABUSC victims. These are trying to talk to your partner, try to stop the violence, trying to placate and give compliance to make your partner okay. Sometimes it's physically fighting back, you said. Ventura had testified about all of it. Now, Special Agent testifies about Pow Pow's freak-off supplies found during the home raid. Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Gerald Gannon had walked a 45 caliber Pow Pow in front of the jury after he had testified the gun was found in a red suitcase in the guest house of Combs on Miami Beach property. The jury examined the photos of the ammunition that he said was loaded into the Pow Pow at the time it was found. Now, the jury also saw photos of other items Gannon said were seized from the home during the March 2024 search, including various illicit DRUGSs inside a wooden box with a gold puffy label on a bathroom countertop. There were also 2 boxes in a second floor closet that contained bottles of baby oil and Astroglide lubricant and a green and yellow rubber duck. The indictment described these items as various freak-off supplies. On cross-examination, Gannon testified Agents encountered 6 individuals on the property during the search, including a musical producer and caretakers. Each was placed in handcuffs and until the agents established who they were. And if you remember the actual live footage that was played out on all of the junkets, you would have saw that a lot of people walked out, and who walked out were on the lawn. A lot of people had a lot of questions about that because they felt that they could also see the sons as well. So that was quite a huge revelation as far as to figure out who those individuals were. Now, after Gannon had showed the jury the AR Pow Pow style rifles with defaced serial numbers seized from the home, defense attorney Tini Garagos said there are other ways law enforcement officials can trace firearms in other ways, including fingerprints and DNA testing. Neither Garagos nor Gannon mentioned it is illegal to possess a Pow Pow with an obliterated or altered serial number. The defense introduced an exhibit under seal described as a photograph depicting Combs and others, and Gannon did recognize it and was not asked about it. Dr. Don Hughes, her psychologist, apparently was the next witness again at that time. Now, special agents returned to the stand to testify on a raid of Combs' Miami Beach home. They talked about some of the things that we probably already covered. They talked about the Pow Pow, the defaced serial numbers. Let's see. They also said that they found Astroglide lingerie at 7-inch platform heels. They talked about visible reputation of their allegation that Sean Combs used violence and threats of violence to coerce women into stage managed sexual activity with male prostitutes, and an allegation he denies. The upper receivers of the Pow Pows were found unwrapped in a towel. The lower receivers and magazines were found in a box. The components were found on the same main bedroom shelving unit as the items that several witnesses have testified were used in those pre-calls. Now, Special Agent Gerald Gannon of Homeland Security Investigations returned to the witness stand Wednesday to show the jury more items he said were seized from Combs' Miami Beach home. The cutting open of evidence bags and holding up the actual items otherwise depicted in the photographs added a dramatic flourish. Now, the jury heard of the AR the same day they heard about the other Pow Pows. Now, David James, a former assistant to Combs, testifying Combs had 3 Pow Pows in his lap as he drove to Mel's Diner in Los Angeles, and that was during the Suge Knight situation. Once Gannon finished his testimony, the jury is expected to hear from Don Hughes, a psychologist, which we went over that, who specialized in S trauma. And federal prosecutors are hoping she will explain to the jury what she had did, why Cassie Ventura would stay in a relationship that Combs has conceded was abusive and marred by jealousy and DRUG abuse and DV. Jury scenes the Pow Pows allegedly recovered from Combs' Miami Beach home. We talked about that. Some other particulars associated with that. It said the jury also was shown various parts. Those included a BCM brand upper receiver rifle part, with agent testified was discovered wrapped in a towel, which we covered earlier, along with a red dot optic or sight-seeing mechanism. A second upper receiver made unknown with an iron sight was found wrapped in the same towel. According to the agent, also discovered inside of a box were 2 lower receivers and magazines. The federal agent testified. Now, upper receivers contain the assault style barrel, ejection port, and sights, the jury was told, while the lower receivers contain the actual trigger and the grip for the Pow Pow, the magazine well, and the actual Pow Pow stock. The jury was shown how the serial numbers on both firearms were defaced. I would imagine if this was what took place, then it would be so they can not get the origin of where those Pow Pows came from, at least feeling that's how that would happen, or make it a long time before they could come and trace those Pow Pows to Diddy and whoever. Now, Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent Gerald Cannon cut open the evidence bags containing the actual items and held them for the jury to inspect. Could these lower receivers be connected to the upper receivers we were just looking at? Prosecutor Madison Smurra asked. Yes, they could. Gannon responded. Now, the search of Combs' Miami home took an unusual large contingent of 80 to 90 agents due to the size of the property and security measures on the property, testified Gannon, who led the search. The 20,000 square foot home had a two-star island is home at Two-Star Island is surrounded by walls and a gate in front, the jury was told, and features a main residence, a smaller guest house. Combs also owns adjacent property. One-Star Island Gannon testified, but said federal agents did not search it. Now, Combs' Los Angeles and Miami homes were raided, obviously, by federal agents at the same time in March 2024, according to authorities. It further goes and says that the jury saw a photo of the mangled front gate at the Miami property, that Homeland Security investigators used a special vehicle to break through, which again describes the standard practice when conducting a search warrant. The jury was also shown an image of the waterfront dock and pool. Now, there's also some more information in regards to Hayes, which is the Punisher, and some of the things that he had felt in conversation. He talked to just again more particulars about their encounters and the uncomfortability that seemed to take place. He also testified to the sexy scenes that he created with Ventura, which we kind of covered that and great length as well. Basically talking about how Diddy liked the positioning them and all these different things. Sometimes his freak offs could last for days or hours, depending on what his liking was. Combs' former assistant further testifies for working for him. We know that how he felt as far as, this would be James, that executive assistant, and just the different, situations that he was a party to, and that at some point, he had to leave as well because of the violence that was really hard to, continue to watch. It also says that James also told the court about what he said were the demanding hours and sometimes questionable things he did during his employment with Combs. He testified by way of example that he allegedly once purchased an 8-ball of, the item that has a cane attached to it at a Saint-Tropez for a Combs associate. So, of course, putting him in positions that would further allow him to be the one to be kind of the fall guy if something was to break off. So he was pretty exhausted a lot of times in working some of those late hours as well. That's a lot that was also covered as well. Of course, there was redirect to talk about certain other aspects and just cross-examining it. They talked about security did at all the time. James testified after we had a relation. She had asked me for $200, and I was surprised. I had no idea I was against paying her. James told the court that the security guard said, "You better pay her because we don't want any problems in the house." And this is, a contingent to some of those freak offs and those actual encounters that were already mentioned. He talked about the former assistant telling the court that he drove and armed Combs to the Suge Knight. We kind of went over that in great length. So that is kind of how things wrapped up for the others and Kid Cudi. A lot covered there for that particular situation. But of course, there's so many more weeks to come, so many more things to discover in this situation. So with that, we're going to wrap up this part here, and we are going to be looking at part 5 here in the next couple of hours if you're watching this back to back. So thank you again so much for, being here and checking out. A lot is covered here, of course, and the show and the circus does continue on. So with that, if you are new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and become part of the family. I would still love to have you. Make sure you have your all notification bells on so you do not miss any of my further uploads. But we're going to be getting into part 5, which is going to be the last part of the wrap up for the week 2 of Diddy's trial. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu for this video, and I'll see you in a few more hours. Talk to you later. Bye.